triggers as an opportunity to go in and to reparent that wounded inner child. Once again, welcome to another episode, actually episode number 21 of Trigger Proof. I'm proud to say it's been a few months going. I've learned so much along this journey. I've had such amazing feedback and witnessed incremental progress. There's a really important thing that we as human beings must encounter in order to feel expansive and confident in ourselves, and that is a constant connection to incremental progress. And that's one of the reasons why I created this show. Trigger Proof is a show dedicated to those 30 and above struggling with relationship and career limbo, hoping, committing to becoming more powerfully aligned, on purpose, empathetic, heart-driven leaders. This has been my journey as a chiropractor. My name is Dr. Nima Rahmany. I've been a chiropractor for the last 21 years. Well, not 21 years, I lied. Actually 18 years. So if I count school, it's been around 21. But the reason why I'm getting into this as a chiropractor is just I notice clients coming in day to day dealing with stress-related disorders, and I wanted to go upstream to be able to help them. And I discovered that most of their stress-related disorders were dealing with the fact that they had relationship breakdowns. And if I kept going upstream from that, I discovered that our relationship breakdowns, if I could look in my own life and then see clinical cases of the people that I was working with, that these stress-related problems, that these relationship breakdowns had to do with a disconnection or a dissociation from the self and the place that we fit into in this universe, in this vast universe. It is a complete random chance that we're all here in the first place, that you're scrolling through a device and you're watching me from somewhere across the world. I'm here in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, but it is a complete random chance that we are here, connected in this way. And if we don't make sense of who we are and why we're here, we do not have a powerful context. What I've observed is we don't have a powerful context for our relationships, and the relationships break down, and that over time, if we don't heal those emotional wounds from these relationships, not just romantic, but mostly our past relationships from our primary caregivers onward, if we don't do the work to heal those emotional wounds, then eventually they show up and they manifest in our bodies. If you're dealing with thyroid, Hashimoto's, if you're dealing with digestive problems, irritable bowel, anxiety, depression, hormonal issues, problems with reproductive system, like you name it, guaranteed there is a stress and a trauma related trigger that has kind of created it. And so I decided, because of the frustration of dealing with the end stage people who were trying to rearrange furniture on the Titanic, I was getting fed up and anxious and sick of dealing with people stuck in that victim mentality, and I wanted to go and teach people how to empower their lives. So on this journey of self-discovery, I discovered that I absolutely love teaching. I love teaching tools to help people transform their lives and change their behaviors and their states of being so that they can become self-healers. That's the vision that I have for this show, is to create a community, a global community of self-healers, because healing does not come from only the hands of a chiropractor or the prescription of a doctor. It comes from an awareness from the self that happens. And today's episode is probably one of the most important concepts that you're about to learn. If you haven't heard it, I'm sure you've heard it many times, but if you haven't heard about reparenting and healing the younger self or inner child, welcome to your new awareness. Because this is probably, if we can go upstream, like I was talking about, if I can go upstream to going upstream and upstream, this episode is really what it's all about. Because if you get what I'm about to say correct, what happens is you completely transform the relationship with yourself, and therefore the relationship with everybody around you starts to transform as well. It's very powerful, because everyone who reaches out to me on a discovery call who's struggling with transitional anxiety, relationship limbo, should I stay, should I go, divorced and wounded in battle, separated and not knowing whether they should go back or leave, and in that stuck place, I know what that's like. Every single one of those people want the exact same thing. They want to get their mojo back. They want to love themselves. They want to feel comfortable and safe in their bodies, and they want to be healed from their resentments. They want to be cleared from their shame. They want to be present with their children. They want to actually stop the cycle that they found themselves in from their own parenting, from their primary caregivers. And no matter how hard they've tried, they've noticed one of the things we hear is that I promised myself that I was not going to be exactly like my parents. I promised myself that I wasn't going to live in the exact same, with the exact same challenges and the same constraints, and I was not going to treat my children the way my parents treated me, my mother or my father treated me, and lo and behold, they find themselves stuck in a situation where not only are they following the same patterns, but they're literally becoming their fricking parents that they promised that they would never do. So what's the solution? Today's episode is about giving you the solution. Let me give you an example. Earlier, when I was setting up this show, there's lighting. It takes me about an hour to put the cameras in the right place, to get the website and everything going, and the lighting and all of that stuff. And it's always a work in progress, and you never know, there's tech issues. It's a live show, so you never really know how it's gonna go. So I like to show up a little bit early and get set up. And earlier, as I'm setting up, one of the lights, I tripped over the wire. The light came crashing down and just shattered. It's kind of like these lights are a little bit kind of like a fluorescent. So if you've ever seen a fluorescent bulb shatter, it shatters to a million pieces, and then there's this little dust that comes around. And immediately I noticed all of that old conditioning start to show up. I started saying things to myself like, "Oh, you idiot, why do you always do that?" And my mind, my ego, started attacking me. My inner critic was basically just going off on me. And immediately I became aware in that moment what was happening, because what we're going to talk about a little bit about reparenting that wounded inner child, this is the result of months of deep work. And this is, let me show you, let me share with you, I'd love to share with you what happened. Immediately I caught myself beating the crap out of myself for breaking a light bulb. Immediately I stopped, I put my hand on my chest, and I started talking to my younger self. In fact, what I would like to encourage you to do, I'm putting it up against right here, the camera there, and if you can see it, I'm not sure if you can see it, is a picture of me and my younger self. And nice little bowl cut. I slept with gum in my hair. I slept with gum in my mouth the night before, and then woke up with gum in my hair. So I took it upon myself to cut my bangs, cut the gum out of my hair just before school photos. So it's captured forever. So I started speaking to that younger self and saying, "It's okay, I love you anyway," immediately. Whereas before, the old version of me that was dissociated from that younger self would have just continually beat myself up. First of all, I got triggered. I would have continually gone down a path of self-destruction verbally, verbal abuse of the self. And what I notice is every single client that comes to us struggling with relationship limbo, anxiety, that's not able to really get connected to themselves and their purpose, they have a similar thing going on. They get triggered, and then they still constantly are beating themselves up. And so today I'm going to teach you exactly, first of all, what is reparenting, what is your inner child, and how do we take the steps necessary to heal that inner child, and what is it that we do. So here we go. First and foremost, what is the inner child? The inner child basically is the version of you, is the version of yourself that's roughly when you were born to around 7 or 8, which you're kind of in an altered state of consciousness, what we call an egocentric consciousness, where pretty much if you've raised kids, everything is about you. It's a very narcissistic, egocentric type of conscious awareness. That's why when you see somebody, they're so selfish, or you say they're acting like a child. From birth to age 8, we have a very egocentric consciousness. Everything is always about us. And let me give you an example. If you have a mother that is constantly stressed, that is grumpy all the time, that is just really going through a dark period internally, and you're witnessing your mother, you're 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, and you're witnessing your mother in that space, immediately that 6-year-old, 5-year-old version of you is going to make a meaning out of what she's seeing, that disconnection from mother, and say, it must be because I am not enough. She must be acting that way because I am not lovable. Or there's a spanking that happens, or you spill the milk, or something that happens, you shatter the glass, and then mother has a reaction, father has a reaction and loses it, or perhaps your parents get divorced when you're a child. Guess what? The egocentric, narcissistic, childlike version of you, which is the inner child, is going to make a meaning out of it and say that I'm not worthy of love, I'm not lovable. And what happens is that inner child, that wounded, is a wound that we carry along with us. Whether you like it or not, it's a part of you. This wounded inner child, I want you to get this. Here's the distinction, and maybe if you can write this down. This wounded inner child is a part of you. It's not the real you. Now let me say that again. This wounded inner child is a part of you. It's not the real whole you. The real whole you is the person, is the self that's able to distinguish and be the observer to that inner child. The problem is you, if you haven't done the inner work, you haven't been able to distinguish yourself from it. So what happens, especially people who are addicts, people who are in prison, people with mental illnesses, have not been able to distinguish themselves from those voices in their heads that say, I'm not enough, I'm a bad person, I'm not lovable, all of that stuff. Your work here in reparenting is to understand that that is not the real you. That is a part of you. And that part of you that will likely always be there. Okay? And it's usually shows up as a reaction. This is where your reactivity happens. It's a reaction from an old wound. When that bad thing that happened to you when you were a kid, or many things that have happened to you, what happens is when you get triggered, you regress back to that wounded inner child. That version of you takes the driver's seat and runs the show. And it's very difficult to be able to see it when you're in it. This is the work, but it's a practice. It's very difficult. Now, that's why you can't hours later or days later look back and go, oh yeah, totally, I was a 5-year-old in that moment. You were regressed in that moment. The challenge and the work is to be able to distinguish it when it's happening. Because when it's happening, your neocortex is not functioning. You're actually completely in your amygdala, in your lower mind. It's completely taken over. That's the wounded inner child. It is a part of yourself, and it's a reaction from an old wound. So the key component is to have an awareness of it. Now the awareness, like I said, it's not going to be easy while you're activated. This is why I called the show Trigger Proof. It's really my journey of reparenting myself. And what I've observed is that every patient coming in with chronic health problems must do the same if they are actually interested in healing it. Let me say that again. You cannot heal from a chronic health problem, a chronic trauma, without the consistent work of reparenting your wounded inner child. End of discussion. This is from 18 years as a chiropractor, a healer. you must not skip this step. Now, when you get it right, all of a sudden, you'll have an awareness. You'll be able to see a wound, you'll see it come up in a trigger, and you'll be able to resource yourself rather than expecting the other person to do it for you. Because here's what happens. We all have what I like to call healing fantasies. If we don't take on this work and do it right, what's going to happen is we start to take on relationships. We secretly want our romantic love relationships, our work relationships, our friends. We bring people into our awareness secretly, unconsciously, so that we can have the fantasy that they're going to be the one that's going to heal that inner child. Please check in and see, let me know if you can relate to that. We bring people into our awareness, into our existence, unconsciously when we're unconscious, because we have a secret healing fantasy that they're going to be the one to finally heal me. I mean, I remember my ex-girlfriend, she told me, this is what she said, she confessed, she said, when I met you, when I met you, I was like, okay, finally, he's going to be the one to heal me. So we have this, we project a healing fantasy onto somebody else. And what happens is we then betray ourselves because that person can never do the necessary work to fill what's missing inside. So then we say, okay, that person, I picked the wrong guy. And then, or the wrong girl, and then you go on to another person, and then you secretly project that healing fantasy onto them, and lo and behold, it's never enough. And then you go on to them, and it's never enough. And this is that person this is me pretty much my entire first half of my life of looking for another person to heal that. And so that's why I left my marriage, actually, when I think about it. This was almost 10 years ago, well, about 8 years ago. I discovered after 3 years of marriage that she actually wasn't doing the work, wasn't doing the job of actually healing that little 2-year-old abandoned version of me whose mother left for 3 months, was in the formative years, that egocentric self that believed that I wasn't enough. So I had to find a woman and get married to her so that finally she could get rid of that feeling of I'm not lovable and I'm not enough. And when all of a sudden she was going through turmoil, and then she went into her own kind of journey of spiritual growth and dissociated from me and dissociated from herself, because she was also going through her own abandonment wounds and was completely unconscious of it. Both of us were looking at each other going, you're not doing your job. Well, it must be a mistake. Boom, divorce. And that was my first half, costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars, heartache, completely humiliation, detachment from friends. And this is happening every single day because people have not become aware of this. So I'm committed to teaching this so that we have a community, a worldwide global community of self-healers who take full responsibility. So that's the key. You must have an awareness that there is that part of you. Many of us haven't really looked because it's too painful to look. That's one of the big obstacles that you must overcome, is the willingness to look at that wounded little girl or little boy that was hit by their mom or dad, that had to live through divorce and was kind of like a pawn between mom and dad, or had a father that just left and was so detached and dissociated and a workaholic that you're always wondering, or they let you down again and again. You had your anticipation held high, and then boom, the rug was pulled out from under you. And so you have this in your nervous system. And what happens is this wounded child enters relationships. And most of the time, it's completely unconscious of what the triggers are. So your work is to have an awareness, number one, and number two, there must be a practice. Now, this is reparenting. Reparenting is a practice. Number one, reparenting is pretty much the taking on of the responsibility to give that wounded inner child what it didn't get from mom and dad. Now, you can sit and weep and wail and gnash your teeth about it, and which most people do. They'll have all of these stories of victimhood about their mom and dad, which is pretty normal. I know I've lived it as well. And then at some point, you have to discover and take ownership and say, you know what, I'm going to be the one to be the cause of its transformation. So it is the one that says reparenting pretty much is taking on the responsibility of giving that little younger self version of you what was missing. So there's a few different kind of categories of reparenting that you must encounter. First and foremost is discipline. So you either had too much discipline, not enough. So when you do journaling each day or morning rituals, we get our clients to really get disciplined into their routines and rituals and habits. That is part of reparenting your inner child. Because if you can provide some discipline and a commitment to yourself, to your younger self each day, and to actually follow through on a commitment each day to yourself, you're giving yourself a message that you're worth it. So to create that habit of discipline is part of the reparenting process. So for you, it must be meditation, it could be a meditation, it could be exercise, something that a commitment, a promise that you keep to yourself every day. Okay, so that's the first step of reparenting. The second part of reparenting is to put play into your schedule. We don't do that. Play is defined as anything that doesn't really have a specific outcome. You know, wrestling with your kid, you know how you fetch with your dog. They're just inherently there's play embedded into our culture, into our nervous system. And so if you don't do that each and every day, some sort of play, preferably with physical activity, that would be ideal, and some sort of a hobby that helps you activate your neocortex, your higher mind, your middle prefrontal cortex. That is a big component of reparenting, is to put play and hobbies, and preferably in nature, into your schedule. It's really, really important. Even if, that's one of the things that we do. We don't grow old because we stop moving. We don't stop moving because we grow old. We grow old because we stop moving. And I like to add in, we stop playing. So play with each other, with ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Do whatever you need to do, even if you have to play with yourself. But the key component is that's part of reparenting. So the next part is self-care. Self-care with exercise, self-care with habits, rituals, routines, sleep, proper nutrition. This is part of reparenting that you're responsible for, that when you commit to yourself, expands your self-confidence, expands your self-worth, and these are action steps that you take. It's not just a mental game. There are actions that you must move towards that enhance that enhance growth, that enhance building of self-esteem through incremental progress, so self-care. And the last part is what we're going to talk about a little bit more, is emotional regulation. This is something that quite often isn't taught to us by our primary caregivers because they don't have an ability to regulate their own emotions. My parents definitely didn't, and it's through no fault of their own. It's because they weren't shown either, and they didn't make this work a priority. That's why I'm teaching it, because I'm committing to stopping that cycle, moving forward, and helping heal the past. And as I take on this work, I'm seeing a shift happening towards my parents as well. So you have a very huge responsibility. I mean, what I'm here to tell you is that it didn't start with you, but it can end with you if you take it on. So what does that mean? It's an awareness and a practice. Reparenting and healing that inner child is all about, I want you to write this down, using your triggers as a window towards healing, as a path to healing. That's what really trigger proof is all about. Trigger proof does not mean trigger less, because you're not going to get rid of your triggers. But the key component is that you must make this a practice, an awareness and a practice to use your triggers as an opportunity to go in and to reparent that wounded inner child. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and ask. Yes, so we have some obstacles. So what are the obstacles along the way? What's going to stop you from being able to connect to that wounded inner child? Well, part of this journey not only is just the awareness and then the practice of it, but it is the practice of actually connecting to that part of you through a meditative process. We go through this process with our clients in the overview experience, in our live trainings, which is coming up in September in Vancouver, October in Australia, November in Barcelona, and December in Dubai. So I'm really pleased to be able to travel around the world and actually show this in live, real time with people. And what we actually do is we get you to regress back to that time. This is the challenging time, is going back to those events and to connect with that version of yourself, is to connect with that 8-year-old version of yourself. So there will be some obstacles. So I'm going to share with you the process. So the thing that's going to stop you from going in and being able to access and connect and empathize and re-experience those feelings as a child are a few different things. The first thing that's going to stop you is ignorance. Because many people, like I didn't know that there was this thing of the wounded inner child that we must access and really reparent and give that child exactly what we had thought that it needed, that we wanted mom and dad to give us, but we weren't able, but they weren't able to give us. So the first part is you must be awakened and aware of it. Okay, that's the first part. The second obstacle to get over is the whole weirdness of it. If you told me last year that I will be having conversations on a regular basis with this version of me again and again and again, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, how can you do that? So when I first started doing it and I started to connect with it, it was very difficult. I had some obstacles there. There was a blockage. When you first start doing it, there will be some blockages. For example, Joe, who was a guest on our show earlier on the self-love episode a few weeks back, we went in and I regressed him back. He was going through a divorce. Basically going through a divorce. His wife wanted to end it, and he was just lost. He didn't really know who he was. He was really just in a really dark place. So we brought up these emotions that he was experiencing, and I asked him, where did he feel this earlier? And he was 8 years old. So he's 8 years old in a closet, and he sees himself in that, and he was there again. And when I asked him to connect with that little guy and to look into his eyes, I said, what was going on? And he said, it's funny, I can't connect with him. He doesn't want to be seen. He's hiding from me. So the first obstacle that you're going to face when you do inner child work and you try to connect and you regress and we go back there is there's going to be a defensive detachment. In other words, that little kid within you feels so hurt and betrayed that they don't want to see you. If you've ever watched a child, you try to approach a kid and they're triggered and angry and they really want your love and you approach them and then they go, no, get away from me, and they push you away. That's exactly what's happening. The problem is when you try to do this work and you try to connect with that inner child and he or she is pushing you away in anger, saying it's not safe, the inner parent within you that's trying to get connection with them is likely going to get triggered and then run away because they feel rejected. You must bypass that. You must go past that. Lucy? Sorry, my dog's 12 years old and she was snoring right there and it was distracting me. It's a live show, so you have to quiet. So she's up now, so we're good. So defensive detachment is your first obstacle. You're going to try to approach that kid energetically, mentally. Once you've gotten over the ignorance of it and you're like, shit, I got to get connected with my inner child. Once you get over the weirdness of it, that this is kind of weird, especially the guys, when I first told this to Joe, he's like, what, are you kidding me? And I'm like, I know, it's pretty weird. But once we got him there, he got past those two. He discovered that there was a defensive detachment going on with that little kid. That little kid wanted nothing to do with him. That little kid was like, get me away from you. That little kid was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And I asked him, I said, what's that little kid doing? He says, he doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And I told him, stay there, stand your ground, hold space for him. That's what you want to do. You want to make sure, I told him, hold space for him. Do not leave. and then tell him empathically how he's feeling. Give him every single right to feel what he's feeling. Tell him what he's feeling. So once he repeated how he was feeling and empathized with that younger self, for the first time, that little kid felt seen and heard. That's really what we want. Children want to be seen and heard. Us humans at our deepest level want to be seen and heard. That's why I created this show, is because my younger self wants to be seen and heard. Most of the time, however, it's completely unconscious. What we're getting you to do is to realize this is an awareness and a practice. That's what reparenting is. You're not going to get it right the first time, and it's a lifelong endeavor, and this is part of self-regulation that we never learn in school. So once we got him to reconnect with him and then ask him what he needed, what did he need in that time? What do you need to hear? And that younger self is able to answer, I need to feel safe. I need to know that you're not going to leave me. I need to know that you'll always be there. And then you tell that little fucker exactly what he needs to hear. That's the key. You must tell them exactly what they need to hear. And then, but not just say it, you must energetically connect with that area, with that little one. So once we were able to do that, and then he was able to hold a consistent relationship with him over 90 days, guess what happens? Complete transformation. He has self-love, connection to his younger self, and what ended up happening was his relationship with his nephew completely changed. Because before this work that we did together, he really hated kids. No wonder he was hating the kid within himself. So once he connected to the kid within himself, he could actually connect with his nephew, and him and his nephew bond really well because there's an inner child within all of us that wants to feel seen and heard and loved, and we're always looking for other people to do it until we wake up and reparent ourselves and give it to ourselves, and then we have confidence, clarity, courage, and our level of vibration starts to rise, and then we start to connect and attract a more appropriate partner for us. What's more conscious, not a more appropriate partner, because we're always attracting the perfect partner for us at the time at our level of conscious awareness. So if you want to attract a higher level, higher value type of individual, you must do that for yourself. The next obstacle that you're going to have is your younger self was not encouraged to express themselves. So Lisa, one of our clients, when we are doing reparenting exercises in group, I kind of single her out, and she's dissociated from her younger self, and I always get her to connect with the younger self, her little child, and I say, Lisa, go ahead, connect with your younger child. What does she feel right now? And Lisa is like, yes, little Lisa, I know that you're feeling scared. I know that you're and I couldn't feel a connection, right? And it was discovered, she shares with us in the Facebook group, a huge revelation was that her younger self wasn't actually encouraged to have emotions and feelings. That when feelings and emotions came up in her family dynamic, because her parents didn't know what to do with emotions and didn't know how to regulate, they just except to stuff them down, don't have feelings, don't have emotions, just keep stuffing them down. What ends up happening is then she just learned to stuff them down, so she couldn't connect with that little one. As soon as she became aware of that and said, I know that you usually stuff them down, that little child was then encouraged to express, and then she could be a witness and see the little child crying, see the little child feeling fearful. So that's the key, is that little child wants to be seen and heard, but the key is you're going to give it to them, not somebody else. And when you get that right, you don't have to show up so freaking needy in relationships. You don't have to abandon yourself in relationships and attract people who've abandoned themselves but are opposites and are takers. So I hear this, I was with a narcissist. I keep attracting narcissists. I keep attracting narcissists. And they're all men are narcissists. Okay, this is the biggest kind of complaint that I hear, is that women will reach out and have that as a complaint. Well, now we know why. Because if you're so dissociated with yourself, you haven't given yourself what you wanted others to give, you're now going to overcompensate by making sure that other people are well taken care of. You dissociate from yourself in hopes that, the healing fantasy, that they will finally then see you and acknowledge you. But because they're so dissociated from themselves, they will never see you and hear you and acknowledge you exactly the way that you want that would be sufficient to fill that void inside. So it is up to you to step up and do it. Sorry, that might trigger you. That's the good news though, is that you have the access to be able to do it if you're willing to take on the work. So that's one of your obstacles along the path, is that your younger self was not encouraged to express. So you must be able to be a witness to that. You must be able to see that in them. And once you do, all of a sudden it becomes easier. The third one, Peter, who basically shows up, he's 47 years old, shows up in relationships completely detached from himself and hoping that he'll get picked. And he's in two very long-term relationships, both almost a decade long, because just by default, they chose him and he's like, oh, cool, okay. Because he finally felt loved. He wouldn't have picked them, but because, he was chosen, he's like, okay, I'm all in. So he stayed in these long relationships simply because they chose him. So when we went back, guess what we discovered during the overview session? When we went back, it turns out when he was 11 years old, he was in school, and he was one of those philosophical mathematician thinkers. He wasn't much of an athlete. He was a little pudgy. When they were playing sports, he was the last one to be picked. So his 11-year-old or 8-year-old self, whichever one it was, I can't remember. I think it was 8 years old. His 8-year-old self that was not picked was the one that shows up in relationships, needy, constantly hoping, will you pick me? Not really seeing his own value. So what we did was we got him to go back to that little child. And guess what? When I got him to face that little kid, he couldn't even do it. He couldn't even look at that little kid. He even said, I have problems looking at the picture of that kid. And I said, why is that? He goes, because I'm just so ashamed of him. And I'm like, and I told him, it just came through me on the call. I said, imagine how he feels to know that you're ashamed of him. And that just hit him like a ton of bricks. So one of your obstacles to connecting with your inner child will be that you secretly have a feeling of shame about them. You've bought in the story that they are not lovable, that they're not likable, that they're bad, and you are just so ashamed of them that you don't want to have anything to do with them. That is that might be one of your obstacles. Let me know if this is any of your obstacles along that path. So, so once we got him to connect with him and really acknowledge all of the greats, the amazing that he had, he realized like a domino why he showed up in every relationship the way that he did, and he came completely committed to reconnecting with that kid, and on every occasion giving him everything that he was wanting outside from the people in school. So immediately that shifted the dynamic and the narrative with himself. So these obstacles, and maybe more, these are the ones that I've encountered when we're working with our clients that are going to be kind of in the way. So basically your work is here's the last part. The work is to actually become aware, be committed to looking at your triggers as the window of opportunity to go back and reparent. And number 3, you want to ask this question: what do you need right now? What is it that you need right now? Once you've dialed in, zoned in energetically, checked in. For me, all I do is touch my chest, and I can see that. And then I usually take a deep breath in, and then I can ask myself, what is it that you need right now? And then I tune in, I listen in, and that little one will be able to speak to me, and then I can then share exactly what my needs are. So, and then preferably be able to give it to myself. And it's this journey of self-discovery, this journey of asking and inquiring and journaling. And this is where self-love comes from. It is a practice. It's work. Some people are like, oh, it's just so much work. Well, I got to tell you something. The alternative to this work is completely unbearable. You might say that this sounds like a lot of work. It might cost money and resources to invest in developing yourself through this work. But guess what? What has it been costing you to not invest your time and energy and resources into doing this work? It's cost you relationships. It personally has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to not have done it because of breakdowns in relationships, divorce, you name it. Health issues, addictions. It is devastating. And once you can go in and allow that child inside of you to be seen and heard and loved for exactly who they are, and a commitment to reconnecting yourself, your chances of attracting disassociated, disconnected relationships goes way down. You're able to spot the unconsciousness and be able to move on much faster and see the warning signs because you're connected with yourself. This is an ongoing practice that I have dedicated my life to and dedicated myself to creating a community of online and local, global, wherever, self-healers. And I want to say thank you for actually being here to be part of it. Because by participating in this work and just even listening to it, you're part of the community that are global self-healers. And I look forward to really crossing paths with you and hearing, if I ever cross paths with you somewhere in the world, please let me know what impact that this has had on your life. Because that's really what it's all about. I want through this camera lens for you to be able to see my passion and my dedication to being able to share my discoveries in my own recovery. A hero has been defined as somebody who takes the time to heal their own wounds and then shows others how to do the same. And I would love to teach you how to do the same for others as well. So if there's any questions, yes, Aura, love you, hun. It's good to have you. So basically, this is the whole concept of reparenting. Let me know if you have any questions about it. This is part of the intimacy upgrade that we do in our programs. It's really the path to transformation. It's what I've experienced, it's what I've gone through, it's what everyone with a chronic problem, a relationship issue, the answer is always to upgrade. Should I stay? Should I go? Well, here's what happens. Your job is to upgrade, and when you upgrade yourself, the answer just takes care of itself. Either that partner meets you where you're at and upgrades with you, or you then discover that you're just no longer an energetic match, and then you can finally uncouple, but not with resentment. And it takes a few steps to upgrade into your intimacy. This is what we take our clients through. And the first part is nervous system regulation. It is really important for you to actually learn the art of self-regulating. If you check my Instagram right now story, you'll see I jumped in cold plunge in Lynn Valley Canyon in North Vancouver. Why? Because it's uncomfortable, because it's cold, because it's an opportunity for me to dive in and actually experience my sympathetic nervous system going into fight or flight, and then using my higher mind to regulate, which is part of becoming trigger proof. It is a practice, and that cold showers, cold plunges, meditations, chiropractic care, exercise, proper nutrition, and nervous system attunement, living according to your highest values. This is all part of nervous system regulation. The second part that you want to do is to clear your past trauma, because these stories and these I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough comes from the stories that have happened with your mother, father, sister, brother, ex-partner, people who you've worked with. The problem you're going through right now, the challenge you're facing right now, is actually not about what it's about. It's a past trauma that you haven't yet cleared, which is contributing to your story of I'm not lovable and I'm not good enough. So that must be cleared, and I use the overview method to do that. We do that in our live trainings, and I'm actually doing a workshop. Please, if you If you can see the link in the comment section, sign in. I'm doing a live group trigger-proof online workshop this Friday evening, or Saturday if you're in Australia, Saturday morning at 10 in New South Wales. Join us. We only have a limited seating. We have like maybe 5 or 6 spots left. The spots are taken. Only 50 people can attend on the group call. But I'm going to show you and talk a little bit about that. And the next part is, you must learn to upgrade. You must learn how to dance with your dark passenger. That is the awareness and the practice of consistently witnessing the ego, consistently separating yourself from the ego, reparenting the wounded inner child that believes it's not good enough, not lovable, not worthy, clearing the shame and the guilt from the things that you've done so that you can see the innocence of yourself. And when you clear your past trauma and you've learned how to see the innocence of yourself, you have a sense of understanding that starts to develop. And understanding not only for yourself, but for other people. And when you've learned how to dance with your dark passenger, if you've regulated your nervous system, you then develop a sense of authenticity. One of the greatest compliments that I love to get from those of you who reach out and you want to attend our live trainings or start to work together in our group trainings and programs, is we ask, so why do you want to join this program? And the biggest compliment that I get is, well, it's because you're so real. It's because Dr. Nima is so real. And this authenticity, I promise you, has happened. It wasn't always there, guaranteed. If you look at like old videos from like on my YouTube channel from 10 years ago, I totally didn't have it because I hadn't learned how to dance with my dark passenger. I hadn't really worked on nervous system regulation. But now it is a practice. I can honestly say that whether I'm on stage in front of 5,000 people or we're having dinner together one-on-one, I'm literally the same person. And that's a tall order for most people because most of us walk around with masks, and I get it. And those masks are actually what keep us unhealthy, with digestive and hormonal issues. So when you regulate your nervous system and you clear your past trauma, then you develop a sense of presence inside. Those are the comments that we get. I was on a discovery call last night with someone who was like, I'm just not present with my daughter. I'm just not present. I'm dissociated. I'm disconnected. I'm in my head, just like my mom was. Completely dissociated. I'm just not present. When you clear that past trauma and you learn how to regulate your nervous system and you make a practice of this, you develop a sense of presence. You're here, you're now, you're able to appreciate the moment. And so the last part here, that is really part of reparenting the wounded inner child, is to learn empathic communication. Empathic communication, I have a really keen sense now of being able to see other people because I've learned how to empathically communicate with myself and my younger self, my inner child. So that's a real key component that we do in the intimacy upgrade. And the last part is the most important because it's a practice, because you're going to fail again and again and again. You're going to dissociate from your younger self. You're going to get triggered. And what will happen is one of the clients that we work with consistently beats the crap out of herself. I'm not getting it. I'm not getting this. It's not right. I'm not getting it. What she's doing is she's judging her feelings. That's basically what we do when we judge and abandon and blame and shame our little one. We're judging that little one for having feelings. We're judging negative emotions. And so it takes a commitment and a community to see and witness you and to be able to bring you back to the experience of being kind and reparenting yourself, because you will forget again and again and again. Even now that I'm sharing this with you, tomorrow you're going to dissociate and you're going to not be connected to yourself, and then you're going to turn around, you're going to blame yourself and you're going to shame yourself, you're going to beat yourself up. And that what's available is to come back consistently and realize it's an awareness and a practice and a commitment for life. And so as you do it for 3 months, for 6 months, the longer that you do it, the more and you learn how to become your best friend, and you're doing all of these practices, the longer that you participate in it, the middle prefrontal cortex starts to become thicker, which is the prefrontal cortex, the front intuitive creative part of your brain, starts to develop. It's like conditioning, it's like muscle. The longer that you do it, it thickens, so it's easier for you to stay present and to stay connected with yourself as your best friend. So your time span of breakdowns, which usually are 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 days, whatever, just like me when I broke the lamp right now earlier and I was just ready to beat myself up over it, I turned around and I was like, Nima, I love you anyway. And that wasn't available to me before. I was just letting something like that send me off the rails. So this work, this intimacy upgrade, is ideal for you if you find yourself getting triggered very easily, anxious all the time, constantly becoming needy in relationships, constantly wanting other externals to fill what's missing inside, and noticing that when you get triggered, you go off the rails, and instead of bouncing back and resilient within a few minutes to a couple hours, one thing happens in your morning and your entire day gets shot, and you're noticing that you're amped up all the time. People don't feel safe around you. Your kids, your family, they keep their distance because they're afraid of saying something to you because you're gonna be so freaking reactive. This intimacy upgrade is for you. Send me a direct message and tell me a little bit about your story, and I'd love to see if you qualify for an intimacy audit and a strategy session if you're actually committed to resolving it. So my name, once again, is Dr. Nima Rahmany. You learned how to reparent your wounded inner child. You basically understood how to upgrade yourself if you're stuck in limbo and in experiencing all of those things that I explained, that your relationships just really aren't working. I know what it's like. I had to actually go through all of these steps, cry the tears, do the work, and now it is my absolute purpose and vision to be able to share this work with other people. So hopefully you got something great out of it, and send me any comments, feedback. Please share this or tag somebody that you know really needs to hear this. And I look forward to seeing you at the next perfect time. Sign up for the webinar group call right in the comment section below, and we'll see you next week.